white beaches and really fine sand, crystal clear waters, but it's also been the hotspot of a lot of terrorist activity by groups allied with the Islamic State or with ISIS. So I've been honestly very struck growing up by this conflict and how real it was to the people around me. I've experienced my grandmother receiving bullets because she was being threatened by these terrorist groups. I've experienced some neighbors being kidnapped by these same terrorist groups. I've experienced waking up to the sound of gunshots in areas where there's still some active conflict. And in the public schools in these areas, you literally can see Marines with big rifles walking around while the kids are in school as a form of security. So it's quite intense, and it's been happening for decades now. And unfortunately, today, the Philippines still ranks 10th in the countries most affected by terrorism in the world. And if you look at the statistics, there's one terror attack happening nearly every day. And that's insane. And one reason for this conflict is the lack of cohesion across people of different religions and cultures. And among other things, it's really, I think, this divide, a polarization, a kind of distrust, a kind of lack of cohesion. And I'll talk more about that later. But my family offered a different perspective. And that's also another narrative that led me to where I am today. So this starts with a love story. My dad, he was about to become a priest when he was young, a Catholic priest, because he came from a very religious family. But then he met my mom. And my mom's actually Muslim. She comes also from a very religious family. And when they met, the sparks flew, love at first sight, all that jazz. And they fell in love. And despite the fact that their parents wanted them never near each other, they eventually ended up getting married. And it's insane because, my parents up till today, they don't like PDA. They don't like holding hands. They don't like, touching each other in public, because when they were young, when they were dating, they couldn't, because they couldn't appear as if they were together in public. So the love is strong in these two. And it was just Valentine's, a few weeks ago, and I hope you all had dates. But anyway, the message here is that there's hope, Maybe the person you're looking for is from a different background, different religion, or a different country. Who knows? So eventually, my parents started a family. And though it was already weird that they came from two religions, it was even weirder how they set up this family to be. They actually decided that they would raise the kids with two religions. So usually when you have this kind of setup, one person converts so that you only have one religion in the household. But in my case, my dad stayed Catholic and my mom stayed Muslim. And they said that they would teach their kids both religions until they come to an age where they could decide for themselves what religion they'd like to follow. So me, as the eldest of three siblings, I was taught, honestly, Islam and Christianity growing up. I was exposed to an environment where I couldn't eat pork, but we did attend mass with my father. I learned verses from both the Bible and the Quran. My relatives would teach me prayers or lessons from both of these religions. And overall, honestly, I came out of this experience feeling that really there were more similarities than differences between the two religions. They were both talking about love. They were both talking about harmony. They were both talking about generosity and charity. And it was an overall positive experience. It was only sad that I could honestly contrast that with what I was seeing around me. So the question for me was that I knew that peace was possible, but the experience I had in my family was very different from the reality that I was seeing outside, that conflict, that terrorism right in my hometown. So I've been asking myself what to do about it since I was a kid, because I was really bothered by the contrast. And eventually the answer to me came when I started going to high school and then eventually to university. So in the Philippines, it's honestly quite difficult to get a quality education. You have to shell out like a lot of money just to really get good education. If you don't have a lot of money, which is what the reality is for majority of Filipinos, you end up going to public school, and usually the public schools aren't as nice. So I was really lucky because I went to public schools that were basically the best in the country, and I didn't have to spend a single I didn't have to spend any money because I got scholarships for both high school and university. So I basically spent nothing from high school to university, which is an extremely rare privilege because so many of the people I knew who didn't come from rich backgrounds had to pay so much to just to have a good education. And that's when it kind of clicked for me how important education was. And this was me many years ago, first year in high school. I don't know why I had that hairstyle. Um, but even then I was already asking myself, this education, the power of education, is this something that we can use to promote peace? And eventually the answer became yes. I saw this line by Maria Montessori that said, establishing lasting peace is the work of education. All politics can do is keep us out of war. And when I read it, I really started thinking, like, this is it, this is how I can bridge that gap, that conflict or that contrast between what I see in my home, the possibility of peace, and what I saw outside, the reality of conflict. So education was the key. So on that note, my family and I started a nonprofit organization called CHRIS. So CHRIS actually stood for Cristiano Islam Peace Library, or Christian Islam Peace Library, which is the first project that we did in this NGO. So back in 2008, we started by building libraries, providing scholarships, and donating books and school supplies to young people affected by conflict and poverty. We did that because we believed in two things. First, a lot of young people join terrorist organizations not because they really believe in the ideology, but because they saw it as a good way to earn income because there weren't many opportunities where they came from. So this is the reality in the Philippines. For instance, in those groups that are allied with the Islamic State or with ISIS, a lot of young people join that not because they really believe in what ISIS stands for, but because they don't see many other opportunities around them. So the attraction of crime and being able to ransom or being able to conduct activities that let you earn from crime was the kind of thing that pulled them into that organization. And the other reason why we started with this kind of education was because we knew how important stories are in forming people's mindset about other people. When you're exposed to books, when you're exposed to characters, when you're exposed to narratives that let you understand and really get in the shoes of people from other backgrounds, other religions, other countries, other colors of skin, other ethnicities, then you form a bond with them that is so important as you get older. So that creating that openness, creating that empathy was something we knew we could achieve through libraries or by providing young people with access to stories, basically. And throughout the years, we've been very happy to work with a lot of young people from these communities. And I just want to show you some pictures. So this is a mobile library that we did in an area where there was a very gruesome tale of some public school teachers being beheaded by a terrorist organization. And it was actually pretty scary going there. We were accompanied literally by a military tank, just to set up a mobile library. So it was insane. But also, we were so happy to be there because despite the reality of the kids in that area, they were also very talented and had so much potential to maximize. And this is a photo of one of our libraries from before. These are photos of the scholars that we were able to support for many years. So we were able to support scholars from preschool to university, and we're very proud to have helped 7 students complete their university education. And honestly, I was happier when these kids graduated than when I myself graduated from university, because honestly, it was a bigger accomplishment on their part, knowing the kind of reality that they faced on a day-to-day basis. And we're also very grateful to have shared our story in different platforms. and in different events like this one, which I'm so sad that I can't join you physically, but I'm doing my best. And we've also had campaigns where we bring, for instance, for World Hijab Day, we bring young women together to learn about what it's like wearing a hijab, what the hijab is all about, and why Muslim women feel what Muslim women feel about the hijab. Is it for them not just a form of faith, but also a form of fashion? Is it also because of their personal identity? Is it also because of what they see as their personality, their style? So we had these non-Muslim women actually listen to Muslim women while they were teaching them to wear the hijab. So it was a very nice time. And because of the campaigns we've had, because of the platforms that we've been able to reach, we are now working with a lot of great organizations like the Kofi Annan Foundation, which is based in Switzerland and founded by former United Nations Secretary General Kofi Annan, on wonderful initiatives like Extremely Together. Extremely Together is a global movement of young people working towards preventing violent extremism and promoting peace. And I'm one of the first 10 people to work on this, along with my other colleagues from different parts of the world. And we started this in 2016. And it's been something that's been getting bigger. And it's such a joy, honestly, to work with young people from everywhere. Okay, so this is intentionally a blank screen because mostly in talks like this, your speaker, so someone like me, would talk about the accomplishments and everything that went right and the milestones we reached. But I reserve this blank slide for telling you that, since starting this organization in 2008, I've really encountered so many failures, so many setbacks, so many instances when I wanted to give up, instances when I said, you know what, I can't be a leader. Screw this, I can't do this. Or I felt that maybe I am too young to lead an organization, or maybe I really don't know anything much about peace. Maybe I should work on getting my PhD first or something. Or, I'm in a room and I get ignored by people older than me, or I get discriminated against because I'm a woman, or people simply don't understand who I am because I'm talking about being both Muslim and Christian for some weird reason. So that blank slide represents all those things, all the difficulties we faced, all the challenges we thought we couldn't surmount, but actually ended up working over. And I think there was a very poignant time. This was around 2017, 2018, when I knew that I stopped working for Chris. So we ended the organization. We said, okay, that's it. We've gotten tired from this. We've gotten burnt out. So let's stop this. So we did, actually, for a few months. We literally stopped our operations. We had very minimal activities going on. And I felt like a big failure, a big loser. And unfortunately, as I was browsing around that time through the photos of Chris, I saw this photo. And it reminded me of the time when we went to Zamboanga, one of the war-struck areas I told you about earlier. And we gave books and other first aid items to a community that was displaced by the battle at that time. So we gave out books, and it was really interesting because there weren't tables or chairs. It was basically an evacuation center. And this kid, just grabbed a book and sat in the middle of that blank space on the floor. This is a gymnasium in a school, by the way. And he was just reading right there. And to me, this was so inspiring because there was this kid who probably lost their home, lost all their possessions in the conflict, and is willing to grab a book and, just sit down and sort of start again, learn again, read a story again. And when I saw this picture, I was like, okay, it's time to start again. So from that blank space, from that blank slate where I almost gave up, we ended up starting Chris again, basically. And I'm so happy to report that since then, we've become stronger than ever. And today, we're focused on a different mission. So now we're investing more on training young people to become peace builders and leaders. So before, we had a set of projects that, we just asked young people to become involved in, like, hey, we have these libraries, or hey, we have these scholarships. Where do you want to help in? But now we feel that we could trust young people's creativity and their ability to think outside the box, and their energy and their knowledge of their peers to come up with more unique solutions that maybe aren't available yet. So we've been conducting sort of hackathons to help young people come up with brilliant ideas on peace building. And we've also been giving them seed grants and training to mentor them as they execute these ideas. So I can tell you more about it later if you're interested in the Q&A, but there have been some really great out of the box ideas on peace building from people who have themselves experienced conflict or have come from communities affected by conflict. And we've also continued our online and offline campaigns promoting positive values like empathy. Like, for instance, this is a photo of an exhibit that we did in one of the most famous tourist sites in Manila. And this is actually organized with the Austrian Embassy in Manila. This is a lomography exhibit of different photos on the theme unity and diversity. So it was amazing. And still recognizing how important education is, or the access to education is, to many young people, we've also been investing in giving access to students who have been left behind because of the digital divide. So now a lot of learning has become remote, but many students, especially in the Philippines, still don't have access to the technologies they need to actually attend school, to call their teachers, to watch webinars. So we've also been providing them with tablets and other materials. And we continue to work with our partners like the Coffee and Foundation on Extremely Together. And we've just started creating chapters all over the world. So we now have chapters in the Philippines, Somalia, Uganda, and Pakistan. And it's really been a great time. Working through this, I've met with a lot of young people from both the Philippines and abroad who have come up themselves with different approaches to peace building. Some of them have built schools. Some of them approach it from a perspective on justice and human rights. Some of them are writers. Some of them create videos on social media on peace. Some of them have been working directly with people who have been radicalized to de-radicalize them and to help them integrate back to society. So all of us have our different approaches. But I think for me, what it really boils down to is my story. So my story, as someone who comes from these two backgrounds, somebody who, realizing how similar these two backgrounds are, Christianity and Islam, ended up telling people that, hey, this girl on the right, she's exactly the same as the girl on the left. They have the same aspirations. They both want to support their families. They both want to make the best out of the opportunities given to them. They both want to study. They both want the same thing, really, out of life. So why do we keep on telling ourselves that they're different in such radical ways when they're not? So that's my story. And I just want to sort of end, not super end yet, but just pause here and give you this quote from one of my mentors, Kofi Annan. So he said, education is quite simply peace building by another name, is the most effective form of defense spending there is. So think about it, in a time now where we're experiencing this. Back to the conflict in Ukraine, and not just in Ukraine, but in other areas like Palestine, Syria, Yemen, Afghanistan, all of these places. I want you now to think about your story or your approach or your ideas towards peace building. And I want to start by asking a few questions that can help jumpstart the discussion we have later on. So the first question is, how do we get people to listen to each other again? So take note of this, but for now, I just want to share a little piece from me. So the piece is that cancel culture isn't great all of the time.